Her heat was dangerous, but her touch made it impossible to step away. The desert night exploded with light. Dr. Kane River looked up from his microscope just as the sonic boom rattled every window in the research facility. Through the reinforced glass, a streak of violet fire tore across the star-filled sky, trailing sparks and debris like a dying comet. The object, definitely not a meteor, slammed into the canyon 2 miles east with an impact that sent tremors through the concrete floor. Kane's heart hammered against his ribs. 15 years as a xenobiologist, and he'd never seen anything like this. He grabbed his emergency kit and was in his rover before the alarms even started blaring. Protocol demanded he wait for the containment team, but protocol had never accounted for the way his instincts screamed at him to move, to see, to discover. The desert floor blurred beneath his tires as he raced toward the crash site, following the pillar of violet smoke rising against the stars. The spacecraft was unlike anything in Earth's arsenal. Organic curves melted into crystalline structures that still pulsed with fading bioluminescence. The hull had split open like a fractured geode, revealing an interior that seemed to shift between solid and liquid states. But it was the figure sprawling halfway out of the wreckage that stopped Kane's breath entirely. She was beautiful and utterly alien. Her skin was the deep purple of twilight, smooth and gleaming with an otherworldly sheen. Dark hair cascaded around her shoulders, shot through with silver strands that caught the moonlight. Her features were humanoid but refined, with high cheekbones and full lips currently parted in unconscious distress. She wore a form-fitting suit that had been torn in the crash, revealing smooth purple skin beneath. Kane approached cautiously, medical training overriding his wonder. Her chest rose and fell, she breathed. Her body radiated heat like a furnace, the air shimmering around her. When he checked for injuries, her skin was fever-hot against his fingers, yet somehow it didn't burn. Her eyes snapped open, brilliant amber with vertical pupils that focused on him with startling clarity. She spoke in a melodic language he'd never heard, her voice urgent and afraid. She tried to rise, stumbled, and Kane caught her. The contact sent electricity racing through his nerves. She was burning up, yet her touch didn't hurt. Instead, warmth spread through his body like liquid heat, intimate and invasive in ways that had nothing to do with temperature. "Easy," he murmured, supporting her weight. "I'm not going to hurt you." She searched his face, understanding his tone if not his words. Her amber eyes were hypnotic, filled with intelligence and something else, a vulnerability that made his chest tighten. She was injured, afraid, and completely at his mercy. In the distance, he heard the sound of approaching helicopters. The containment team. They'd take her, dissect her ship, lock her away in some underground facility. Everything in Kane's scientific training said that was exactly what should happen. But looking into those amber eyes, feeling the dangerous heat of her body pressed against his, Kane made a choice that would change everything. "Come with me," he said, gently guiding her toward his rover. "I'll keep you safe." She didn't understand his words, but she understood his intent. She nodded once, trusting a stranger because she had no other choice. As Kane drove back toward his private lab, the alien woman's head rested against his shoulder, her dangerous heat seeping into him. He knew he'd just committed career suicide. He knew he should turn around, do the right thing, follow protocol. But her touch made it impossible to step away. Kane's private laboratory became their sanctuary. He'd converted the sealed biodome, originally designed for cultivating extremophile organisms, into a hidden refuge. The reinforced walls blocked thermal signatures, keeping Zyphira invisible to the scanning equipment that swept the desert daily. For 3 days, he tended to her injuries while the outside world searched frantically for the crashed alien vessel. Her wounds were unlike anything he'd treated before. Where human tissue would have scarred, her purple skin seemed to regenerate from within, the damaged areas glowing faintly as they healed. But the process required tremendous energy, and her already dangerous body temperature climbed higher with each passing hour. "Zyphira," she told him on the second day, pointing to herself as she practiced the sounds of his language. Her voice transformed his name into something musical, Kane. Now, as dawn light filtered through the dome's tinted panels, Kane pressed a cool cloth to her forehead. She lay on the medical bed, her form-fitting suit replaced by lightweight fabric that wouldn't trap heat. Even through the cloth, her skin burned like desert sand at noon. The fever's getting worse, he murmured, more to himself than to her. But Zyphira understood more than he realized. Her hand caught his wrist, her grip gentle despite her strength. Not fever, she said slowly, carefully forming the English words. Normal. My people, fire inside. Her amber eyes held his, and Kane felt that electric pull again. He tried to maintain professional distance, to treat her as he would any research subject. But every accidental touch, every moment their gazes locked, eroded his carefully constructed walls. Why did you run? He asked, keeping his voice soft. Why crash here? Zyphira's expression darkened. She sat up slowly, the thin fabric clinging to her curves. Home, they choose. Marriage. Not love. Not choice. She pressed a hand to her chest, right over her heart. I choose. The words were simple, but the emotion behind them was universal. She'd fled across the stars to escape a life not her own. Kane understood that kind of desperation. He'd buried himself in this remote facility for similar reasons, running from expectations he couldn't fulfill. You're safe here, he promised, though he knew it was a lie. Every day he hid her was another day closer to discovery. Zyphira reached up, her purple fingers trailing along his jaw. Her touch was fire and silk, dangerous and irresistible. Kane. Good. Kind. She struggled for more words, then abandoned language entirely. She pulled him down, and he went willingly. Their lips met, and Kane gasped at the heat of her mouth. She tasted like spiced honey and starlight, foreign and intoxicating. Her body temperature should have been painful, but instead it sparked every nerve ending to life. He deepened the kiss, one hand sliding into her silver-streaked hair while the other traced the curve of her spine. Zyphira made a sound between a sigh and a purr, her body arching into his touch. Her hands explored his shoulders, his chest, learning the planes of his body with eager curiosity. When his lips traveled down her neck, tasting the unique sweetness of her purple skin, she whispered something in her native language that needed no translation. But a sharp alarm shattered the moment. Kane pulled back, breathing hard, and checked the security monitor. 2 black SUVs were approaching his facility. Government agents, he said tersely. They're searching every research station. Fear flashed in Zyphira's eyes, but she lifted her chin with determination. She stood, moving to a panel she'd been studying for days, a section of her ship's hull that Kane had salvaged. Her fingers flew over the organic controls, and a holographic display materialized in the air. Ship, she said, pointing to a schematic. Fix. We go. We. Kane's heart stuttered. Zyphira turned to him, her amber eyes blazing with emotion that transcended language barriers. She took his hand, pressed it to her chest where her heart raced as fast as his own. We. Outside, car doors slammed. Kane looked at the monitor, then at Zyphira, then at the ship schematics floating in the air. He was a scientist, rational and methodical. He should hand her over, save his career, do what was logical. But nothing about this was logical. Not the way she'd crashed into his life, not the dangerous heat between them, not the fact that he was falling for someone from another world. How long to repair the ship? He asked. Zyphira's smile was radiant. Days. 5. 6. You help. I help, he agreed, then pulled her close for one more burning kiss before hiding her away as the agents knocked on his door. The next 4 days were a blur of deception and desire. By day, Kane maintained his routine while government agents prowled the facility, their questions growing more pointed with each visit. By night, he and Zyphira worked feverishly on her ship, hidden in a canyon cave where he transported the salvaged pieces. Their communication improved hourly. Zyphira possessed a brilliant mind that absorbed English with startling speed, while Kane learned fragments of her lyrical language. But they communicated best in touches and glances, in the electric space between professional necessity and personal need. On the 5th night, as they calibrated the ship's navigation system, everything changed. There, Zyphira said, her hands manipulating the holographic controls. The ship's core pulsed with renewed energy, bathing the cave in violet light. Tomorrow, she flies. Tomorrow. The word hung between them like a blade. Kane set down his tools, his chest tight. And then you leave. Zyphira's hands stilled. She turned to face him, her purple skin gleaming in the ship's glow. I must. My people hunt. If they find me. She didn't finish, but her fear was palpable. What happens if they catch you? Return. Marriage. No choice, no voice, no. Me. She pressed her fists against her temples in frustration. How you say? Prison with ceremony. A gilded cage, Kane supplied softly. Yes. Cage. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. I cannot stay. Earth hunts too. Your government, they want, study, cut, learn. She touched his face, her burning fingers tender against his skin. I cannot stay. But Kane. I want. The raw honesty in her voice broke something in him. He'd spent 5 days pretending this was temporary, that he was just helping a stranded traveler. But the truth blazed between them brighter than her ship's core. He was in love with her. Come with me, Zyphira whispered. Please. I can't just leave Earth. My work, my life. Is this life? She gestured around the cave, then toward the facility beyond. Alone. Hiding. Running from something, yes? Like me. She saw him too clearly. He had been running, from family expectations, from a failed engagement, from the suffocating pressure to be someone he wasn't. He'd buried himself in work, in isolation, calling it purpose. Where would we go? Hope flared in her amber eyes. Everywhere. Nowhere. Between stars, there are places. Free places. Stations, worlds, where my people and yours and hundreds of others trade, live, love without asking permission. It sounded impossible. It sounded perfect. Kane. She took his hands, pulling him close until her dangerous heat enveloped him. I know you 5 days. But my heart knows you longer. Like we meet before, in dreams, in other life. You feel. He did. God help him, he did. Instead of answering with words, Kane kissed her. She responded with a hunger that matched his own, her body pressing against him with desperate need. They'd been dancing around this for days, stealing touches and heated glances, but now the dam broke completely. His hands mapped the curves of her body while she pulled at his shirt, kneading skin against skin. The cave floor was unforgiving, but neither cared. When clothing finally fell away, Kane discovered that her entire body radiated that same incredible heat, that her purple skin was softer than anything he'd ever touched, that the sounds she made when he kissed down her throat were the most beautiful music in any language. Zyphira was equally curious, her touch both bold and reverent as she explored him. When their bodies finally joined, the heat between them became almost transcendent, not painful but transformative, as if they were burning away everything they'd been before and forging something entirely new. Afterward, they lay tangled together on his hastily spread jacket, her head on his chest, both breathing hard. The ship hummed nearby, ready to carry them away from everything they'd known. Tomorrow, Zyphira murmured, we fly. Kane thought of his empty apartment, his sterile lab, the carefully controlled life he'd built from fear rather than passion. Then he thought of stars he'd never seen, worlds he'd never imagined, and a future with this incredible woman who'd literally crashed into his life. Tomorrow, he agreed, we fly. She lifted her head, amber eyes searching his face. You sure? No regrets? Kane smiled, tucking a silver-streaked lock of hair behind her ear. I'm sure. You're worth every star I'm giving up. Then I show you better stars, she promised, sealing it with a kiss that tasted like forever. But as they dressed and prepared to return to the facility for one last night, neither saw the figure watching from the canyon rim, or the signal device transmitting their location to forces already in motion. The tranquility of dawn shattered with the sound of descending spacecraft. Kane bolted upright in his quarters, immediately reaching for Zyphira. She was already awake, standing at the window with her body tense, staring at the 3 vessels hovering above the facility. They weren't human-made. The ships were elegant and deadly, their hulls shimmering with the same organic technology as her crashed vessel. No, Zyphira breathed, her face draining of color, or what passed for it in her purple complexion. "They found me." Before Kane could respond, his door exploded inward. But it wasn't government agents who entered. 3 figures stood in the doorway, all with the same purple skin as Zyphira, though varying in shade. 2 were clearly warriors, their bodies armored with living metal that seemed to breathe. The third was older, his face marked with silver patterns that denoted rank. "Zyphira of House Theron," the elder said in perfect English, his voice cold with authority. "Your rebellion ends today." Zyphira stepped in front of Kane protectively, her body radiating heat that made the air shimmer. "Commander Vex. I should have known father would send his most loyal dog." Vex's expression didn't change. "Your father sends his love and his final command. Return now, accept your bonding to Lord Kravik, and your indiscretion will be forgotten. Refuse, and we will take you by force." I told him no. I will not be traded like property to strengthen political alliances. You are the last heir of House Theron. Your desires are secondary to duty. Vex's gaze shifted to Kane with open disdain. "And you've complicated matters by involving a human. Does he know what you are, princess? What you're truly running from?" Kane's stomach dropped. "Princess." Zyphira's shoulders sagged slightly. "I was going to tell you." "Tell him what?" Vex interrupted, stepping closer. "That she's not just any noble, but the crown princess of Pyros? That her marriage to Lord Kravik would unite 2 warring houses and prevent a civil war that would consume millions of lives? That her selfishness will drown worlds in blood?" The words hit Kane like physical blows. He looked at Zyphira, searching her face. "Is that true?" "Yes," she whispered. "But Kane, you don't understand. Kravik is a monster. He's killed 3 wives already, claimed they died in accidents. My father knows and doesn't care. He only wants the military support Kravik's house provides. I would rather die than." "Noble sentiment," Vex said coldly. "But your death would also mean war. At least as Kravik's wife, you'd serve a purpose." Rage flared in Zyphira's eyes, and suddenly her body temperature spiked. The air around her ignited, flames dancing across her purple skin without burning it. Kane stumbled back in shock as fire wreathed her like a living cloak. "I am not a bargaining chip," she roared, and her voice carried a resonance that rattled the walls. "I am Fireborn, daughter of suns, and I will not be caged." The 2 warriors moved to flank her, but Zyphira thrust her hands forward. Columns of flame erupted from her palms, forcing them back. The fire didn't spread to the facility. She controlled it with absolute precision, a weapon and a warning. "Now I understand," Kane said quietly, pieces falling into place. "The heat. You're not just warm. You can generate fire." Zyphira glanced at him, fear flickering in her eyes, not of the warriors, but of his reaction. "All my people carry fire within. But royal blood burns brightest. I didn't tell you because I was afraid you'd see me as a weapon, as everyone else does." Kane thought of the past 5 days. The gentle way she'd touched him despite her power. The careful control she'd maintained even in their most passionate moments. She could have incinerated him at any point, but she'd been nothing but tender. "I see you," he said firmly. "Just you." Something shifted in her expression, relief, hope, love. But Vex laughed harshly. "How touching. But it changes nothing. Princess, you have 10 seconds to surrender, or we will be forced to use suppressors." "You wouldn't dare. Father wants me alive." "Alive, yes. Unharmed was never a requirement." Vex nodded to his warriors, who raised weapons that hummed with ominous energy. Kane's mind raced. The facility had emergency protocols, defenses against everything from sandstorms to terrorism. One option was insane, possibly suicidal, but it might give them the opening they needed. "Zyphira," he said quietly, "how much heat can you generate?" She met his eyes, understanding dawning. "Enough to overload any system. Even suppressor weapons. Especially those. But Kane, the feedback would destroy half the facility." "Do it," On my mark. He moved to the wall panel, fingers flying over the controls. Vex, you want to talk duty? I'm a xenobiologist. My duty is to protect alien life, not deliver it to oppressors. He slammed his hand on the emergency lockdown button. Reinforced barriers crashed down over every entrance. Vex snarled, realizing too late what Kane had done. Now! Kane shouted. Zyphira's body erupted in an inferno. The temperature spiked so high that metal began to glow. The warriors' suppressor weapons shrieked, overloaded, then exploded in their hands. Vex dove for cover as the blast knocked his warriors unconscious. Through the flames, Zyphira remained unburned, magnificent and terrible. She grabbed Kane's hand, hot but not painful, and they ran. Behind them, Vex shouted orders into his comm unit, but the lockdown had bought them precious minutes. The cave, Zyphira gasped as they sprinted into the desert dawn. The ship. I know. Can you fly us out with warriors pursuing? She flashed him a fierce smile, flames still dancing in her eyes. Kane, I'm a princess. I was flying combat maneuvers before I could walk. They reached the canyon as more ships appeared on the horizon. Zyphira's vessel waited, humming with power. As they climbed aboard, Kane took one last look at Earth, the only home he'd ever known. Regrets? Zyphira asked, her hand finding his. He pulled her close, kissing her hard. Not a single one. Let's go steal our future. The ship lifted off just as warriors reached the cave mouth. Zyphira's fingers flew over the controls, and they shot into the sky like a violet comet, pursued by her people's ships but already plotting a course to freedom. The jump through hyperspace felt like being unmade and remade in an instant. When the universe snapped back into focus, Kane found himself staring at something he'd only dreamed of, a massive space station suspended between 3 stars, its architecture an impossible blend of hundreds of alien designs. Welcome to Haven, Zyphira said, guiding her ship toward one of the countless docking bays. No government, no kingdoms, just free beings living as they choose. The station was enormous, a city in the void where beings of every imaginable species moved through markets, gardens, and gathering spaces. Zyphira had explained during their 3-day journey that Haven existed in neutral territory, maintained by an alliance of refugees, traders, and those who'd rejected their homeworld's conflicts. Will they find us here? Kane asked as they disembarked. They won't stop looking. But Vex can't attack Haven without starting an interstellar incident. As long as we stay here, we're untouchable. She took his hand, squeezing gently. It's not perfect, but it's ours. The first weeks were an education in wonder. Kane discovered that the universe was far stranger and more beautiful than any textbook had suggested. He found work at a research collective studying cross-species biology, where his Earth training made him uniquely valuable. Zyphira used her royal education, diplomacy, strategy, languages, to work as a mediator in Haven's courts, helping resolve disputes between species. But the shadow of her past lingered. Messages came from her father, alternating between pleas and threats. Reports filtered through that House Kravik had indeed allied with other factions, that tensions on Pyros were escalating. Zyphira carried that weight quietly, but Kane saw it in her eyes during quiet moments. 2 months after their arrival, everything came to a head. Kane returned to their modest quarters, a far cry from any palace, but home, to find Zyphira staring at a holographic message, tears streaming down her purple cheeks. What happened? He asked, immediately at her side. My father. He's ill. The physicians say. Her voice broke. Weeks, maybe days. Kane's heart sank. He'd never met the man, but he was still Zyphira's father. What do you want to do? I don't know. If I return, even to say goodbye, they'll never let me leave. Kravik will use my father's death to claim me immediately. But if I don't go... She buried her face in her hands. How can I not say goodbye? Kane pulled her close, letting her burn against him, a sensation he'd grown to love. Then we find a third option. It took 3 days of planning, calling in every favor Zyphira had earned, and leveraging Kane's growing reputation as a xenobiologist. But finally, they had it, a proposal so audacious it might actually work. Zyphira stood before Pyros's High Council via secured transmission, her image projected into the throne room where she'd once lived. Her father, gaunt and weak, sat on his throne. Beside him, Lord Kravik, a massive, scarred figure whose cruelty showed in his eyes, watched with predatory interest. "Father," Zyphira began, her voice steady, "I love you. I will always honor you. But I cannot return to be Kravik's prisoner." "Then you doom our world to war," her father said wearily. "No. I offer something better. An alliance not through marriage, but through knowledge." She gestured to Kane, standing beside her. "My husband is one of Earth's leading xenobiologists. Through him, I've connected Pyros with the Galactic Research Collective. They're willing to offer Pyros membership, access to technologies that would make House Kravik's military support obsolete." The council erupted in murmurs. Kravik's face darkened with rage. "She lies. This is another escape attempt." But Zyphira had prepared for this. Representatives from the collective appeared in supporting holograms, confirming the offer. In exchange for Pyros's unique understanding of thermal energy, their fire within, the collective would provide advanced medical technology, agricultural systems, and defensive capabilities. "Your daughter may have fled duty," the collective spokesperson said, "but she has secured Pyros's future through diplomacy rather than subjugation. We ask only that you respect her choice of asylum." Zyphira's father studied her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but carried across light years. "You were always the clever one. Your mother would be proud." He straightened on his throne, finding strength. "House Theron accepts this alliance. And—" He fixed Kravik with a cold stare. "Lord Kravik, your services are no longer required." Kravik's roar of protest was cut off as guards moved to escort him away. Zyphira's father turned back to her, and for the first time in months, she saw approval in his eyes. "Be happy, daughter. Live free. And perhaps—" a small smile. "Visit an old man before he goes." The transmission was routed through neutral collective channels. Zyphira returned to Pyros under diplomatic protection, with Kane at her side. She held her father's hand as he passed 3 days later, finally at peace with her choices. The funeral was magnificent, a celebration of fire and light. And when it was over, Zyphira and Kane returned to Haven together, no longer running, but choosing. Their quarters had been upgraded, a gift from the collective for brokering the Pyros alliance. But Kane barely noticed the improvements. He was focused on Zyphira, silhouetted against the viewport, the light of 3 stars painting her purple skin gold. "So," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "What now? We've escaped pursuers, overthrown marriage plots, and changed interstellar politics. That's got to be a quiet week for us." She laughed, the sound like bells. Turning in his embrace, she traced his face with her warm fingers. Now we simply live. We wake up every morning and choose each other. We explore the universe. We build something that belongs to us alone." Sounds perfect. Though. He grinned. "I have to admit, there's something I've been wanting to try since we got here." "What's that?" Kane produced a small box. Inside was a ring, not valuable by royal standards, but beautiful nonetheless. It had been crafted by a crystalline artisan, its facets capturing and refracting light in impossible ways. "I know we told everyone we're married for political purposes," he said, suddenly nervous. "But I was hoping we could make it real. Zyphira of House Theron, former crown princess, current love of my life, will you actually marry me?" Her answer was a kiss that burned with joy, followed by a whispered yes against his lips. They made love that night with the stars as witnesses, their bodies entwined, her heat and his coolness finding perfect balance. Weeks later, they married in Haven's gardens, a ceremony that blended Earth and Pyros traditions, attended by friends from a dozen worlds. When they exchanged vows, Zyphira's body blazed with controlled flame, a display of pure happiness that needed no translation. Their life together became the adventure Kane had always secretly craved. They traveled, studied, loved, and argued, and built a home that was neither earth nor Pyro's but something entirely their own. Zyphira taught him to appreciate fire not as danger but as passion. Cain showed her that gentleness could be its own kind of strength. On their first anniversary, as they watched a stellar phenomenon from their quarters, Zyphira rested her head on Cain's shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Leaving Earth?" Cain thought of the man he'd been, isolated, afraid, hiding from life in the name of safety. Then he looked at his incredible wife, thought of the worlds they'd seen and the life they'd built. "Not for a second," he said honestly. "Your heat was dangerous. But your touch made it impossible to step away. And I'm glad I didn't." Zyphira smiled, flames dancing in her amber eyes. "Then let's never step away. Let's keep burning together." And they did, for all the years that followed. Two souls from different worlds who found that love, like fire, knows no boundaries when it burns true. The end.